This is the last month of Boomsday, and we're here with another Arena Meta Report. Right after the success of Dual Class Arena, there are a lot of new players playing Arena this month. We know that there are only a few weeks left before Rastakhan hits, so if you want to practice Arena and gain some gold, now is the perfect time to do so. With the end of Dual Class Arena, there have been some shifts in the class tier list. Warrior is now the undisputed king of Arena, with Rogue and Warlock behind. After 7 wins, you will see these 3 classes a lot more often. In this video, we'll give you some specific tips on how to draft and play against these 3 classes. Before we start, let's talk about some changes. For viewers who paid attention to our previous videos, we basically labeled Paladin and Hunter as the worst classes in Boomsday. Although they still boast the lowest win rate currently, there is strong evidence from HS Replay that the developers have increased offering rates of strong Paladin and Hunter cards after Dual Class. Speaking of offering rate changes, there's strong evidence that Warlock and Druid had its strong cards being offered less. Historically, the developers had made these changes called micro-adjustments behind the scenes without informing the players. These changes significantly affect the Arena meta tier list. For example, Warlock used to have a 53% win rate and now declined to 50%. Paladins and Hunters increased by 2 to 3%, even though they're still on the bottom of the list. We can attribute some of these meta shifts to the Giggling Inventor nerf as well. Knowing these changes, what are some tips to increase your win rate this month? Tip 1. Draft and play your 3s, 4s, and 5s. You want a solid early game curve with 5 3-mana minions, 4 4s, and 3 5s. This curve is important due to the lack of efficient spells that can answer these early game stats. For most classes other than Warrior, ideally you want to have 2 to 3 1-mana minions as well. With this consistent curve, you want to be playing the minion with the most stats every turn to contest your opponent. Your opponent often ends up wasting removals on these minions before you start dropping bombs. The top 3 classes have one important commonality. They all use their life as a resource. By curving out, you lower their life quicker, so their cards and hero power become worse. An important factor is the lack of 2-mana minions. Due to overabundance of strong 3-mana minions, your 2-drops are immediately eclipsed by 3-drops. You can draft some 2-mana minions, but they better have some special effect that makes them playable after turn 2. Tip number 2. Draft enough late-game minions. In the current meta, you often have to play against some Warrior or Warlock who seem to have all the answers. The sweet spot for late-game minions, which are defined as 6 mana or more, is around 5 to 8 cards. Ideally, you want to have 2 to 3 6-drops to contest 5-drops and 3 to 4 7+ mana cards as finishers. There's less emphasis on these numbers if you have cards that generate cards or draw other cards. Late-game minions have to be impactful the turn they're played. This means that they're either taunts, offer a crazy amount of stats for their mana cost, or are premium removal options. One caveat to understand is that when you're offered a pool of bad cards, oftentimes it's correct to go for the larger minion. This is because the lower cost minion can be more of a detriment even if you can play it earlier. Remember, your first 5 turns are mostly playing good statted minions. If your 3-3 can't contest a 3-4, you're already losing the game. In this meta, you can usually draft good 3s, 4s, and 5s without having to take a bunch of below average minions. When premium early game minions show up, you take those so you can take the below average larger minion for some value. For example, as lowly rated as Stormwatcher is, it would still have more impact than a Boisterous Bard or Oasis Snapjaw. Once you have this base template of early and late game minions, the rest of your deck should have a balance of small removals, large removals, some kind of AoE effect, and some card draw. Tip number 3. Playing around devastating swing cards. With the latest changes to Arena, there are generally less swing cards. However, they still exist. You want to weigh the impact of these devastating swing cards when playing the game. Ask yourself 2 questions. 1. How behind do you get if you allow these swing cards to trigger? And 2. Can you afford to hold back playing cards if your present board is white? Against Mage, can you refill the board if they flame strike you? Against Warlock, can they cast just 1 Defile to remove your entire board? Against Warrior, how devastating would Super Collider and Warpath be against your board? Against Rogue, are you looking for optimal betrayal positioning? While these cards have become more uncommon, if the risk is entirely losing the game if your opponent has it, you have to try and play somewhat around it. Here's the caveat. If you're out of cards and you need to continue to pressure, then playing into a swing is your best play. Here's an example. We have the option to play Blessing of Might on the Furious Etin or pass. Yeah, we'd lose to Siphon Soul, but we know we'll never win if he Siphon Souls regardless of what we play, so we push for the strongest play. And this wraps up our report on the last month of Boomsday. Head over to our previous Warrior, Rogue, and Mage guides of Boomsday where much of the strategies still apply. For more 10-win deck lists, you can follow our arena expert Tachii on Twitter, where he consistently posts his 12-win decks. As always, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and we'll be back for Rastakhan in a few weeks. Thanks for watching.